right, welcome to another episode of Butler's Babble. And today I'm thrilled to have Julia Pearce joining us today. Julia is an inspiring presenter and author whose dedication and advocacy and personal storytelling shines through all of her work. She's spoken at numerous conferences and written extensively on communication and her own impactful experiences. Julia's penned her memoir, The Boy Who Became More Than We Can Imagine. I just got my copy in the mail, so I'm actually going to be reading that very shortly. And the book is about her son, Dallin, who lived with multiple disabilities, which she'll get to throughout the podcast. And with over 2 decades of education assistive technology, Julia brings a wealth of expertise to all of her endeavors. When she's not working, she's very adventurous. You'll find her running mountains, gardening, camping, or diving into a good book, of course. And Julia lives in Utah with her husband, Brandon, and continues to inspire with her resilience and passion. So without further ado, why don't we welcome Julia to the podcast. Julia, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's so great to be here. Thanks so much.
No, we're glad to have you. And you and I got to talk a little bit last week or 2 weeks ago and go over some of the stuff. And I couldn't wait to get you on here. And so I'm glad we were able to finally get you here. And so for the people who don't know you or have not read your book yet, why don't you give them a little background history on Julia, where you grew up, and basically just a little bit behind the scenes of Julia.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I do live here in Utah. That's in the western part of the United States. We're surrounded by mountains. So when I was growing up, I did love to get into those mountains. When I was young, we would scramble over boulders with my brothers and sisters, and we would just climb and get into the mountains and do so many good things. I also love to do other adventurous things. I wasn't one of those kids who just stayed on the ground, but I also love to get into the trees and just go for adventures. That stuck with me, and I called that part of my life my first act. It's when I thought I knew what I was doing, which is hilarious now, because who knows what they're doing when they're a young one. I thought I did. I thought I knew what I was going to do for the rest of that life thing. That's hilarious. I also love to go on trips. We would go on car trips. We would go just seeing what was around and about with my friends, with those family members, and just go see the world. And that's where it started for me. I love to go do it.
No, exactly. And I grew up in the city. I'm a city boy. I grew up in the big city, Toronto, and or just outside of Toronto. So stuff like going to the mountains and things like camping, that wasn't a big thing in our household. I mean, we played sports and things like that. Now I live in a small town that's all around here. There's lots of cliffs and a lot of waterfront area and a lot of outdoorsy stuff here, which I still have to do a lot more of. But I'm glad that you were able to enjoy that as a child. And I know what you mean about climbing trees. My daughters were the same way. They always loved to be up climbing trees and that. Their friends used to call them tomboys and that, but they still had that girly sense to them. So I think that's great at a young age to get that in there.
Yeah, my mom tried to do that girly side, right? Put on the lace on the dresses, and I was pulling on that lace. I was the other side of things. I would run and jump and get into the mud. That's what I love to do.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's the way you got to let kids be kids. I mean, that's the way life is, right?
For me, it was for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. What were you like in school? Were you more of the academic? Were you more of in the band? Were you more of the athletic person, or were you more of a bookworm? And what were you like in school?
So in school, I love to learn. I love to be around the books, but I also love to be the one who continued to teach. So there were a couple of friends that we would learn with each other, and then we would go be with other kids and help them learn as well. And so we became what folks call teachers' aides, which is hilarious. I think we sometimes got in the way and they gave us things to do down the hall. Go do this and go do that because we thought we were helping. I don't think we were helping much, but it was that learning phase of life where just give it all to me. Help me just go into that learning space. I have a favorite teacher from third grade, actually, who probably saw that I was just wanting to soak it all up. And she helped me go beyond my neighborhood where a bunch of us would, go into this realm. We had busy streets all around us. And then she helped us go beyond that and taught us how to go see what was inside our city. And what a great space that was as well. So I loved the learning, but I also helped other people learn as well, meaning those other kids in our school as I got a little bit older, maybe fourth or fifth grade in our elementary school. So it was a bit of both. And that was super fun. I wasn't super intelligent. I wasn't that kid who everything came naturally for. And that was okay for me. I did have to grind into it and um, get into my mode of, okay, I got to study. I got to study. And that was okay.
No, I know the feeling. I was the type like scrambling the morning before assignment was due at home at breakfast, trying to finish my homework type of thing. I was the same as you. I wasn't it's not that we're not intelligent. I wouldn't say you weren't intelligent. It's just a matter of we all learn in different ways and we all pick up things in different ways. One of my daughters is very good when it comes to school and understanding stuff. The other one, she was more of a hands-on type of thing. You had to show her and physically show her how to do it. And so we all learn different ways and we're all smart in our own little things. So I know, and like you said, there was that one teacher that really you gravitated to. And I think we all had that. Everybody who's successful, I think, had that one person that motivated them and showed them kind of the way to go in that. And mine was my music teacher in grade 6, 7, and 8. And then I had her again in grade 11 when she came to my high school as a teacher, or grade 12, sorry. And so she motivated me a lot into the arts and stuff. And that's why I'm a photographer now and still into music and that. So I think you need that sort of mentor, I guess you can say, at an early age, and that's going to make you successful. But that's the way I look at it anyways.
Yeah, I think education is one of those spaces. For a little minute, I had wondered about being a teacher, becoming that teacher, and then the next space of my life that we're going to get into, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for amazing teachers. And when I became that parent who came into the schools, I was like, man, I'm glad I'm not a teacher because what if I had to deal with me? Oh man, that was persnickety. And I was there to get some results. And I thought, man, I'm glad I'm not a teacher, but I sure am grateful for them.
No, I agree. I agree. So through high school, were you the same kind of just not knowing still what you wanted to be? You were just sort of doing the what you had to do to get through school type of thing?
So I did still love going to school and I took care of business. I was there, took care of my classes, learned a ton, excelled in a few areas, and then got on with business. I was going into a few areas, but I wanted to go still beyond that mountain. At one point, I wanted to be a forest ranger. That's the folks who, go and watch, take care of those trees and help people when they come up on the mountain. And then things got a little twisty when I got out of school. I had a different set of things, which again, let's go into the second act. It's where I met somebody and thought, oh man, this is not what I had planned. I was going to go live in the world. I wanted to go join the Peace Corps and go help a bunch of people. And then I met this person who became my husband, that Brandon that you mentioned, and things changed. But in high school, I did, take a bunch of really hard classes and keep going forward. I had a plan to go to college and university and then met this guy, oh lands, met this person and he changed all of those plans. And I didn't go into the Peace Corps and didn't go into university. And there it was. Second act started to come to me.
Yeah. So you didn't go like the college university. You met this gentleman. Was it just a big courting area, or did you guys get married very quickly, or and decide you wanted to start a family? Like, how did that all come about?
It was surprising for both of us. Neither one of us had any plans to change what we were going to do. Like I said, I really did have a plan to go into the Peace Corps. And go see the world, go be changed by the world. I knew that I still wanted to go be that adventurous person. And then I met Brandon, and he had no plans of changing or settling down either. And we were like, oh, shoot, what is going on here? So we met each other, dated for a little while, and thought, well, we may as well just get going. And we got married within 7 months of meeting one
Wow.
another. I think it was about 7 months. Because why wait if you're going into this space and, well, we're not going to go do that other thing we both had planned. And so we did. And he's a really fantastic human. We laugh every day still. It's been 35 years now, and he cracks me up. I make him walk away going, what have I done? And that's where we still have landed this many decades later. We just go, oh goodness, we are hilarious, and we wonder about it still. But that's what happened as we were both going into different realms and met each other and went,
Yep.
well, here we go. Here we go.
Mhm. Sometimes you just know, because I know even with my wife, I met my wife later in life, but it got to that point where you just knew, because we were like, sometimes you finish each other's sentences, or you're thinking of something and then they would say something like, I was just thinking that in my brain. Like, that's not when sometimes you just know there's a kindred spirit there that you're supposed to be in that alignment with. So it's great that when you do finally find that, because not everybody has the chance to find somebody like that. So sometimes you just know and you know. And so I don't think 7 months is too uncalled for when you know.
People have questioned us. They questioned us then. They're saying, what are you two doing? You don't even understand. And we're like, we know. We don't understand anything at all. And we're still going into this. So take bets, see which one happens next. And do you want to come with us? And it happened to be a
Exactly.
really wonderful, wonderful, out of this realm thing that came to us, and we stepped together into that second part of our world.
No, I think that's awesome. And you can't, like we always say, it's never bad to take chances, because I know with myself, I mean, if you're going to wait to buy that car, you're going to wait to have a baby, you're going to wait to get married, or if you're always saying, well, I want to wait until I'm financially good, or until this, you might never do it. Sometimes you just got to take the bull by the horns, as they say, and just do it, and see where it takes you, see what journey. And obviously with you guys still together after 35 years, this journey is not over, and you guys are just enjoying the ride as you go.
Which is a kind of a mystery. We look still now after what came into that second act and think, what if we had waited for any of it? Would we have missed what came to us? And we could look at all of those what ifs, and people still say, well, what if this and what if that? And then the opposite of that what if is there's joy there. What if we go with the joy of the unknown? What if we go into all of the both hands being there together? There's two sides of it. And we didn't know that then. We really were clueless. And it's okay to be clueless. We were. And we were ridiculous then. And we do laugh every day, even in the minutes of hard times.
No, I'm glad, because that's how you get through life, is to try and keep that negativity out as much as you can. I mean, we're always going to get some negativity coming our way, whether it's self-made or from the outside, and it's how you deal with it is going to make you who you are, and how your relationship is. So I agree with you. So going from the second act, then, how long was it that after you got married and you started your life together that you guys ended up having a child?
So it was about 2 years in. Our son was
Okay.
born about 2 years in. And again, not purposefully, right? These things just came to us, and we said, well, here we go. And our son came with such joy himself. He was born with just adventure himself. It seems that our life was going to come with all of these moments of pop and just abandon and oh my gosh, what can we bring to us next? When he was born, he was he was 2 weeks late over his due date, which due dates are mysterious anyways, and he actually came
Mhm.
on his perfect timing. And then he just loved life purely. He loved looking around, and he was at the very beginning of his life starting to embrace people and music and even the wind. He just loved to face the wind and watch everything, the lights. And his first big holidays came to him, birthdays and celebrations, and he was just wide-eyed and what we would say this typical little dude, because he embraced everything around him and people, and he pulled them to him. He was the oldest grandson on one side and the second grandson on another, and joy came to him. He was also flipped upside down once in a while. Days and nights were mysterious in the beginning of life, like many children. So we worked through that, and that's how you do things with children. But he was ready for it. He was this little dude. How much fun can you have?
Mhm.
So much fun.
No, exactly. And at that age, firstborn, they have so much energy too. And it's just trying to keep an eye on them and try and keep up with them sometimes with that energy pace. I know it's what it's like when my daughter was born. It was the best thing. My youngest daughter, of course, both daughters, but my youngest daughter, when she was born, it was like the best thing that ever. But then after a while, you're like, I don't have the energy with this kid anymore. Like, where do they keep getting the second and third wind coming from?
For sure. And I would rub out the knees in my jeans because we would crawl around and play with full abandon again. It was just dump everything out and put it back in and dump everything out. And he would look at you out of the corner of his eye like, did you see what I just did? Did you see? And the tub became where everything went in, because how big of a box is that tub? So everything went from the toy room and into the tub. And it was like, check it out. Did you see how much cool I am? And it was all
Exactly.
it was all just embraced with how amazing is this? How amazing.
No, definitely. And so it wasn't until what, about 2 years old, I guess, is when all the other stuff started happening. That's when things turned around in a different aspect. It's going from this rambunctious, energetic young boy that's just jumping around and doing like you're saying and that, and then all of a sudden, boom, this hits. Now, how does it start? Is it just like he's just not feeling well? Is it more like he's getting a lot of flus and colds, or how does it all start?
Well, like you say, our son Dallin was almost 2 years old. In fact, about a week before he turned 2 years old, he was getting molars in, 2-year-old molars, the bane of all existence. And I was starting a new job. So went to work on the first day of this new job, and Brandon was home with Dallin. So dad was home with the little boy and getting new molars so that he didn't need to come to daycare on this day where he's just getting new molars and has got a little teeny runny nose, because 2-year-olds and runny noses just are forever combined. No other symptoms. And then out of nowhere, Dallin started having a grand mal seizure, or a tonic-clonic seizure. Brandon looked out of the corner of his eye and saw this big seizure happening, which is full body movement. Brandon caught him as he fell and called 911 immediately. There were no other signs before this happening. And even now, this was 31 years ago, Brandon can say exactly what it looked like, exactly what he felt like. So they were home. Brandon calls emergency numbers, and paramedics show up at the home. They can't find anything else going on except for this one massive event. And it's very traumatic. The paramedics say if you can get to your pediatrician, then they won't need to transport up to our children's hospital. So that's what they do, is Brandon takes our son up to the pediatrician. There's no sign of any illness. There's no little ear infection. There's no sore throat. There's nothing else that can be seen. And so the pediatrician says this might be one of those events that happens one and then that's it. They go home. Pediatrician says, go home, watch for anything more to happen, and then let me know. So I get home from that first day at work and look at the two of them and say, what in the world happened to you two? And they tell me, and I was like, there's no way. That is so unbelievable. We go home
Yep.
and have a regular evening. Dallin has dinner. We take, the evening bath for him and read stories and put him to bed. There's nothing else that would give us any clue that there was more to come. The next morning, Brandon goes to work at his regular time. Dallin gets up a couple hours later, and he can no longer walk on his own in a straight line. He can't sit up in his little chair on his own. He can't feed himself his cereal, which he's been eating on his own for months and months. And his head isn't able to hold. He can't sit up or hold his head up. I called the pediatrician and she said, get him to the hospital right now. We go up there, and within that day, he has dozens and dozens of more of those seizures for no reason. There is no sign of anything else going on. All of a sudden, there's a team coming to him in the hospital. They can find no reason. Every test is done, every scan is done. So, like a CAT scan and an MRI, and nothing can be found. So, he's this kiddo who went from one person, one little teeny tiny person the day before, to this new happening, massive stuff going on the next day, and no one can find anything. He was admitted, and for the next 9 days, they track everything, blood work, more scans, more tests. And it turns out that the doctors called this a catastrophic illness, which means Dallin lost all 2 years of his development in those first couple of days while seizures continued. He had hundreds and hundreds of them in the hospital. The deal with a catastrophic illness is that's the only word they could give it, as he was trying to recover all of the happenings with no cause. Totally mysterious on those first days as they tried to at least control and slow down the seizures that were happening. That's what happened. And we were mystified and trying to breathe every day.
I can imagine, because it sounds like that's got to be one of the scariest moments for a parent can ever think of. And like even when you were saying like the next morning, like when he couldn't hold his head up and he was doing this and they said get him to the hospital, right? Some of the symptoms you were talking about, it almost sound like you would think he's having a stroke or something, because just the way he was acting in that. And it's kind of funny, like you said, up until 2 days before that, he was just the same old Dallin doing his normal 2-year-old stuff. And then all of a sudden in a day and a half or a night and a half, he's now changed to something that's going to affect his whole life, basically, because they can't find out what's wrong with him. Now, in that 9 days, I was actually going to ask you, was he still having those seizures? And then you said it like he must have had like about 100 of them during those 9 days. What was it that they were able to do to try and slow that down? Because you said they were doing everything to try and slow it down. They can't find out what's causing this. It's obviously not a blood clot or anything like a stroke would be, because they've doing all these tests and they can't find that. Could have it been like a parasite that started it? Could have it been like you hear of people getting Lyme disease and they could have been bit years and years before, and then symptoms are coming? Is there something to this date that they know of that maybe could have started this or caused this, or is it just still a phenomenon that they don't know what caused it?
All of those questions ran through this medical team that came around them. They tested everything. They tested for lead. They were wondering if there was paint that he had gotten a hold of. They wondered if there was meningitis. That's why they did all of the tests. They looked for tumors. They looked for any possible answer. The one thing that it ended up being on his records is something called post-infectious encephalopathy. That's a big old word. That means it could have possibly been an infection that came in, went through his system, and left. So they're thinking that it could have been a virus that came and left. A virus is a really intense, beastie thing that you can't always find. That's the only possibility that came from all of that workup, because it wasn't a bacterial find. It wasn't any of those other possibilities, because there wasn't evidence. And when you're looking at medical world, that's what they're trying to find. They're trying to find evidence of something, and it's usually done by looking for something and crossing it off the list, and looking for something and saying, nope, it's not that. And so they looked and crossed off any other possibility and was left with a virus, possibly, and they never found a virus. So that's why something has to be put on a medical record when a child goes home. And he did go home. Interestingly, they didn't know if he was going to survive for many days, and we didn't know that. So every minute I would write down when the seizure started, what it looked like, and when it ended. And that ending point was, okay, whew, we got through that one. And then it would begin, and I would do that, starting, what it looked like, when it ended. I still have the little notebook, and occasionally I still look at it going, dude, what a dude. Because he came through all of it.
Exactly.
And we never had an answer. And to this day, we've never had an answer of what that was.
So was it mostly just seizures happening? Or was it like he was getting nauseous? Was he getting sick and ill and that, or was it mostly just the seizures?
It was the seizures. He wasn't able to eat for a while because he had lost his ability to swallow for just a little bit. He did get the swallow back pretty quickly, so he wasn't having other support with his eating, because he did get the swallow back. We're grateful for that piece of it. But there wasn't any other fever. There was no other indicator to help figure it out. They called him the Enigma later in his life, because he was this little mysterious human.
Yep. No, it sounds like he was, going through a lot of. It almost sounds like you said, if it does turn out that it is a virus, because again, nobody knows what caused it, but if it was a virus, it almost sounds like one of those things that comes and leaves ramifications behind. If you look at some people, even during the pandemic that we just went through, and some people that did get the virus, they were left with stuff like, there's some people lost their sense of taste and smell, and some got it back, some never got it back. So it could be, I'm wondering if it's something similar to that. And of course, I'm not a doctor. I'm just thinking outside of my head here, that maybe he did get a virus that after the virus was gone, it still left something in his system that his body couldn't control, and it was taking over, I guess. It just, like you said, some people who've got the past virus there, they lost their sense of taste, and I have a friend who got it in 2020, 2021, and to this date still has never got their sense of taste back. So it could be something like that. I don't know. It's just amazing what this little guy went through, and it sounds like he was totally a little trooper there, because he wasn't going to let it stop him. So, so finally you do get him home from the hospital, and seizures are still happening here and there, but were they starting to slow down as time was going on? Or was it just rampant? Like every week you're like, okay, you wake up every morning saying, okay, how many, or when is it going to start today?
Part of what happened in that hospital, you had asked, how did they slow down? And it was medication. He had large amounts of medication to stop them. there's something called status, and we wanted to not go into that type of seizure because that means you can't stop it. So he was given a lot of medication in the hospital to stop those back to back to back to back to back seizures. And in fact, he had other symptoms starting to show along with the seizures because this was all neurology. It was all around that little boy brain. And the other, because he wasn't able to walk very well at all while he was there, he did lose that skill. And the one thing that he showed us before he came home is he did learn how to walk again in the hospital. Well, the doctors didn't think he was going to be able to do that. And he looked at them one day while they were talking about him not being able to walk again. And the next day he climbed out of the crib and began to walk and then run while he was in the hospital. And the nurses beautifully got him an IV pole and attached his IV so that I wasn't walking around with this IV. And he began again in the hospital. So the doctors began to follow him, and we knew he was the one to lead what was going to come. So when he left the hospital, learning to walk again, we followed him. We got a helmet because he was this wobbly little guy now. He was learning to walk, but he was they call it ataxic, so very unsteady. And we kept going. We followed him and we started therapies, and the seizures continued. They were very tricky little things. Seizures are unknown, and he would break through seizure medications and then we would readjust, and he would break through again every few months for many years. And every time his seizures would come back, he would lose some of his skills. And that doesn't happen for everyone, but it did for Dallin. And he would get up and begin again and lose skills and relearn them. And what tenacity. This dude, I mean, I would look at him and go, I just need to relax. And he would be, I don't think so. No, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to go. So are you coming? From a very young 2, 3, 4, 7, 8-year-old. And on we went with therapy, with relearning. And he taught from that early age resilience and just audacity. Like, what audacity just to keep going. My word.
Definitely. And when he did have these seizures afterwards, were they long seizures, or were they just ones that would go for 5, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, or were these ones that could go on for minutes sometimes and then you just got to wait it out type of thing?
Both. They were both. His often came in clusters, so he would have a few together. And if they were longer than 5 minutes, I would call his neurologist and say, what do you want us to do? And at times we would haul everything up to the children's hospital again, and they would need to do another set of assessment. He didn't often have to be readmitted to the hospital, but they did sometimes need to do an assessment there in the emergency room and say, here's what's going on. Sometimes it was another, just doctors having eyes on him, and then we would go home again. But sometimes they were 30, 45 seconds. Sometimes they were minutes. His longest one was 45 minutes. That was a really long time to be in a seizure. And that was
Definitely.
sometimes scary for him. He knew they were coming a few times. And then other times he had such a variety of types of these seizures that other times he would still be conscious, aware of what was happening, and also having a seizure. There's so many types, and there were so many types of these for him.
And is he like able verbally coherent during like 45-minute one? Of course, you're hoping like you say, he's conscious of what's going on, and that is he able to talk to you saying, "Oh, I can't wait till this is over." Like is it a conscious kind of talk, or is he just sitting there catatonic, basically just shaking and just you're just waiting to see when he's coming out of it?
One of the things that also happened when he was first in the hospital is he lost his spoken language. So he wasn't able to tell us verbally what was happening. And during those long seizures, he would also need to have oxygen because he wasn't able to keep his breathing going on his own. That's when we would get up to the hospital after talking with doctors. So he would sometimes be able to communicate other ways with, he used sign language as one of his ways of communication. Often it was just a deep look of, oh my gosh, right? Sometimes you can look into somebody's eyes and just say, God, that's hard, or I need to be done now.
Yeah.
But the long seizures, it was just pure exhaustion. He would get very fatigued after having any type of his seizures. So it was a huge
Definitely.
variety.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so you say he lost his verbal. I didn't realize that he lost all his verbal. Um, could he sometimes sense when it was coming and sort of even non-verbally just let you know to be aware things are happening and I might be going into another seizure type of a thing, like almost warning signs that he knows it's coming. He's kind of warning you guys, okay, be ready, it's coming type of thing. Or is it just comes right on? Or is it a mixture of both?
So there were 2 times out of all of the years of him having seizures that he could tell us that he was going into a seizure. And one when he was a little guy, maybe 4 years old, and he looked at us. He was having one of those clusters or group of seizures, and he looked at me and said, oh, and then dropped into a pretty big seizure. It was minutes long. And then when he was near his 20s, he got our attention. He made a really big sound. It wasn't using any of his communication systems. He didn't sign. He made a really big sound, and we quickly got to his side. And those were the only 2 times in all of his years, 20 years of having seizures, that he let us know that he could tell. He may have known they were coming other times, but he didn't communicate that with either a verbalization like that, uh-oh, or the big sound. Again, he may have known, but his communication styles, his communication symptoms and systems weren't used by him any other time. And he had thousands of seizures. What an extraordinary human. He just bounced every
Oh, I can imagine.
time.
He sounds like it.
Yeah. He just makes me go, dude, what in the world? How extraordinary you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, very resilient himself in that. Now, did they ever look into stuff like his diet even? Like I know with some people, certain things in diets can affect them too, such as like red dyes and artificial things and that. Did they ever look into, or did you guys yourselves ever look into say maybe something in his diet's causing this?
We did. We looked, it's called a ketogenic diet for some individuals with epilepsy. We looked at a diet. We looked at actually, there was a brain surgery that he was a candidate for at one time in his life that he was considered for. We went through a brain study for that. He wasn't a candidate for it. There, you had to have a very specific, they call it a focal point for the seizures to be starting from. His seizures started from the top. So on the surface of the brain and deep inside of his brain, and then went everywhere. He had a very unique set of symptoms for his seizures, And that's what we found during this brain study. So he wasn't a candidate for either of those interventions. Science comes a long ways across all time. This was a long time ago. Again, he would be 33 years old now, and it started when he was 2. So he was considered for every intervention. And because of the type and where and how his seizures came and went and started, we looked at every intervention possible for him. And he sat where he sat with a lot of personality, and he was like, so I am okay. He let us know that he was still this really powerful force of, can you guys be okay? Which is an interesting space for us. Like, could we be okay?
Yes.
That's our dance. That's our rhythm to come into. It was a gnarly time, and he was just, so I'm still dancing. Come on. Yeah.
Yep. No, it sounds like he was growing up faster than most kids his age do, because he was going through stuff that nobody. Now, how does this affect him when it comes to, like, in those 20 years after this all started happening? His energy and athletic levels a little bit. How did that affect that? Like, what did he get very lethargic? Because it sounds to me like he still wasn't going to let that stop him from being rambunctious and getting out there and doing stuff. And also with schooling, I guess at this time, it's getting to the point where you just can homeschool him, because it's not like you can send him to school. Because what happens if these episodes are happening throughout school, and with other kids around, and it could be dangerous for everybody, including himself. So I know that's 2 questions. One, but yeah, basically his athletic and energy levels going through that, and then his schooling life. How did that work?
The powerful part of life with Dallin is from the minute he climbed out of that crib and said, I'm going to go. What you going to do? And we said, well, crikey, we got to go here. And I was always living on this edge of what's going to happen next. Well, life happened. But also, the questions that you bring are really powerful, because when we went home, we started therapy, and it was 3 times a week. And then it was twice a week because we combined. Dallin used his energy exquisitely. And there was a time when therapy said, we can't do anything more for him. He's got his walking back, and he's got some of what his hands can do back. We're communicating, kinda, and he's got to go, because he doesn't need to be in an office. And when he was 4, he was having those clusters of seizures, and we also started to do horseback riding. So we lived, and we lived just big, because he was that little dude who put his face into the wind and loved watching the wind and the kites and the fireworks, and just big. So we started horseback riding when he was 4, and downhill skiing when he was, I think, 5. And we went rock climbing and canoeing and did things. And when you ask, did it change those things? It did. So we went from downhill skiing to what's called the sit ski when he was a young teenager, because he was changing. He had additional illnesses and ongoing parts of his disability, but he never wanted to stop. Horseback riding went from, I can't sit up on the horse by himself, which meant he had somebody at the front of the horse and people on both sides, so that he didn't just topple off the horse, but he was grinning the whole time. And then he went to trotting on his own with only somebody at the front, and then back again to having people on both sides. So it did change, but he chose when to be done. And
I'm looking at the pictures too in your book here too, and I'm noticing he's a lot thinner than most children would have been at his age. And I guess that is kind of from all this happening, because it's not like he's not able to put weight on.
Part of that is because he was also built like me and my husband. We are not super tall, but we have tall siblings. Dallin, by the time he's in his mid 20s or young teenager, was 6'4". He was 6 feet 4 inches tall because he's got tall relatives, not because of us. I'm only
Hmm.
5'7". My husband is 5'10", but he was 6'4". So if I stretch my arm up as tall as it can go, that's 6'4", which cracks me up. But he had those secondary illnesses, and he ate 4,000 calories a day just to stay
Mm.
upright. And I started cooking with cream and butter and all sorts of beautiful cheeses to add many, many calories. And he never stopped. Even when he went through an illness that lasted months at a time and he was going through continual change, he would get up after those months and want to go and see something, a funny movie, a balloon from his favorite party store. And we were saying, okay, I guess we keep going. Even when I wanted to wrap him in bubble wrap and keep him insulated at home, and he was not having any of it. None of that was going to do it. He went to school for as many years as he could until he said, I'm done. I'm done. That was his choice.
Yep.
I would have loved to do all that 24/7 motherly. Let me put you under my wing. And he was like, oh, that's hilarious. No, I got to go see my friends, my favorite teacher. I got to go on the bus, which I love. And I had to step out of the way. Terrifying,
Mhm.
terrifying.
Now, you talk about that, like he was being very independent by this time. Of course, in his mid late teens, he's starting to get very independent, going to school on the bus. He's going to school, like you said, and that. Um, how did that work with his seizures? Like, I guess when he's in public too, I mean, it's got to be a hard and scary thing, not just for you guys, but for people around, because people like me were very ignorant to the situation. And that's why some of my questions sometimes come across as maybe very ignorant, because I am ignorant to this. How did that affect not just you guys, but the surrounding people when things are happening? Are people coming in to help you? Are they afraid and staying back? Or are they, oh, you should never have brought him out here anyways. You should have him at home. Like, how did the public react to all this?
With his school, he had what's called an individualized education program, and that comes under, in the States, we have IEPs. That's the IEP under our
Mhm.
um, education programs. So he
We have that
had,
here in Canada too, IEP.
yeah, so it's this really specialized set of goals and supports that came in place with him from the time he started school. When he was this little 3-year-old, he stepped fearlessly onto a school bus, and I withered into, you got to be kidding me, why did I just do that? And he was fearless. He could not speak. He couldn't tell anybody what he needed. He couldn't tell somebody that he needed help opening his juice. He was in this dependent stage of having people help him, and I was a mess. I had to trust people. He first, he was like this beautiful, I'm here to go. He never lost that. He was in a space of, I'm doing this. And within that IEP, he had what's called a healthcare plan, which is where we addressed when he needs help with those seizures, when he needs help opening the juice or the milk, how he's going to have help walking again when things changed later in his life. And he chose the people that he wanted to have help him. And it wasn't always the people who were around. He would leave classrooms and they would say, the schools would say, he just left. And I said, that's him telling you he needs help from different people. And here's perhaps why.
Mhm.
So all of that came together for him until he walked into his class with a teacher that was wonderfully supportive, and he said he was finished. And he signed it, flipped both of his hands, and they called me and said, Dallin's done. And I said, done with what? And they said, he just told us he was finished. He got his backpack and said he's finished. And he left school that day, told the school goodbye, and never went back. We did school differently after that. And he was a powerful advocate for himself alongside needing a lot of support. And he had so many people who believed him with his advocacy, with his abilities, and the need for additional people to come into his realm. What a powerful way of living. That's what he did.
Definitely. No, he sounds like one of those people that he was like, I'm not letting anybody else give up on me because I'm not going to give up on me. And if I'm not, I'm not going to allow them to also. And he sounded like he's somebody who knew himself very well. He knew what he could accomplish, what he couldn't accomplish, or just in himself, what he could do in the world. And he wasn't going to let anything stop him. And I think that's amazing. I think we all can learn from somebody like that. Because I think we all put these little barriers on ourselves that, I can't do that, or nobody will ever listen to me if I say this. And that he was the type of person that sounds to me like he didn't care. He's going to do it anyways. And if you're going to listen, you're going to listen. If you're not, that's your fault. And I think we all can learn a lot from that. So this went on for, like you said, about 20 years, and then it's getting close to his 22nd birthday. And that's when, now, was there any signs that it was time that he was going to go, or was this a sudden thing that happened?
So when he was in his mid teenage years, he had this time that was we called it his golden years. He was learning to be independent. We were creating space in our home for him to have his own apartment. Actually, we were putting in a double kitchen. We were having it be where he would have his own space with other folks coming in alongside of us. And then we noticed him using his quads differently, his big muscles, which is when he started to, interestingly, that's when we went to that sit ski, that bi-ski for downhill skiing. It was one of the first indicators that he was using strength differently. And his physical therapist started watching these signs with us differently. Over the next 7 years, we watched him then be able to use his hands differently, and then his fatigue increased. That's when we went to a 4,000 calorie diet. We did many other tests during this time and watched as he withdrew from favorite activities. He also needed support with oxygen at this time as his internal muscles started to be affected by whatever was happening. It was another unknown change for him. We never found out what was happening with what was then determined to be a degenerative illness. And it turned out that every external and internal muscle was being changed. His muscles looked great because we looked at him. His doctors and surgeons looked at his muscles and they were beautiful, but disappearing. And it then went into every part of his system. And at one point, his neurologist contacted us and said, we need to do another scan, another MRI. And I said, we're not doing that anymore. At this time, we had stopped doing lab work because he was so fatigued. We were not doing any other interventions. We were letting Dallin have a really cool, calm, peaceful space and doing what it was he loved. And we had a conversation about, why would I do one more look? And it turns out that the neurologist had a very powerful reason for it. And I write about it in the book. And they did everything that needed to happen for this intervention, for this last look. And it came to the point that his brain actual physiological brain was also being affected, which you don't see in young adults. So his end of life came to a point for the last 7 years of this slow, steady decline, which interestingly and a little bit horrifyingly gave us time to be still and watch and have Dallin decide for that day when he said at school, I'm finished. Because he knew the energy that he needed was better to use those 4,000 calories that he got every day was to, find some hilarity in a funny movie, which he still did. He loved slapstick and he loved animation. But that's what he decided. So we did have a thought, and we then knew nothing, because end of life is a mysterious, quirky, mind-boggling experience for each person, and it surely was for him. Mm-hmm. But he did choose when to be pausing and taking a step to the left or to the right, because that's also how you dance. He was the little dude who loved his music, and he did choose that step to the left and to the right for his entire life.
Good for him. It almost sounds to me, and this might sound kind of trivialized a bit, but it almost sounds to me that he was living in a body that for every year that went by for us, it was like 4 years were going by for him, because it almost sounds like his body was aging 4 times faster than the rest of us. Because when you describe the way his life was going with the excitement of a child, and then going through his before 10 years old, like his later, like 7s, 8s, and 9s, it's almost like he was living his life almost like the rest of us would do at our late teens or something, going into our 20s. And by the time he got to 10, he was living like we would in our middle age, just going out there and doing things. And like you said, he passed away just before his 22nd birthday, almost like he was in older age. Almost, it might be trivializing a bit, but it almost sounds to me, the way his body was breaking down as you're going, and his mind was kind of breaking down a bit, it almost sounds like he was living every year like 4 years to the rest of us, if that makes sense to you. It might be just me being overthinking it or something, but it's just something that came into my mind. I don't know if that ever goes into anybody else's thoughts or not, like he was growing mentally and physically faster than the rest of us, if that makes sense.
It's an interesting thought. I've had other family members who said Dallin lived so well, so big, and with such grandness that he did it in a compact time. What a way to look at it. What if we also had that? What if we lived so big, so well, with such grandness that every day meant big, joyful, resilient, audacious things? What if we didn't wait for that summer perfect vacation? What if we didn't wait for the perfect energy, or when we felt 100%? Because I know there's days when I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait for Monday. What if we didn't wait for Monday? What if we didn't wait for the first of the year to know that we could create our own strength and just become the best human right now? I love that observation, because others have said Dallin never waited. He didn't wait for things. He would look at us directly in our eyes and say, are you coming? I'm going. Let's go. Like right near.
I love it.
Right now, be here. And what a powerful space, because I can sit with my own ridiculous, my gosh, why am I waiting? Let's go. Somebody said, how can you begin when you don't know if you're ready yet? And I'm like, I'm never ready. I wasn't ready when I was 3 or 8 or 15 or 21 or now. And yet I didn't wait to be whatever it was, an 8-year-old. I just went. 8-year-olds go. They just go. Dallin did. He just tried it.
I love it. No, I every word you said there is definitely I've had to learn that over the years. I was always the procrastinator. I was always the one like, I can't do this until I get this much money, or I can't do this until I get this equipment, or until this. And in the last, say, 2-3 years, I've changed my mindset. And there's a lot of stuff I'm doing, including this podcast, that I could have waited even longer till I had more. When you look at the very first episode I did with my very good friend, Carrie Lee Brown, who was my first guest, my recording of that was very crude and just minimal equipment. And I could have waited till I have all the equipment I have now. But I just decided I'm just going to do it, and I'll build my way to there. And I think it sounds to me like Dallin lived his life that way the whole time. It's like, why wait till I get that equipment? I'm just going to do it now. And like I said, everything you're talking about today is something we all can learn from. That's for sure. And I love how in this last 45 minutes of just talking about Dallin, every time, even though it's a negative thing that happened in his life, you're still saying it with a smile on your face. And I think that shows a lot of the empathy that you have, because you don't want to, you want to remember him in that happy, how he was, not any of the negative stuff, how he turned the negatives into positives, and how he rubbed off on you, your husband, and probably anybody that came around him. Everybody left him probably with a big smile on their face. So I think that's a great way to remember him by. So unfortunately, he passed away just before age 22. I think you said it was about 11 and a half years ago. He would have been 33 now. Since then, what have you guys done, you and your husband, then to move on from that? I mean, I know you wrote your book. How long ago after that did you write the book? Or actually, this is very recent, actually. So it's been about 10 years, I guess, afterwards that you wrote the book. But since that time, what have you guys been doing after he passed away?
The first bit after Dallin passed away was similar to when he was in the hospital. It's been sheer survival. We wondered and sat with, you got to be kidding me. And we thought we knew what was coming. That's the great mystery of grief and mourning, is even though we had an inkling that Dallin was going to pass away, like we knew that. We watched for it. We sat with it. It's called anticipatory grief. We anticipated it. We had this plan, okay, this and then this. And we had people that sat with us during that time with hospice, and we knew nothing. That's the mystery of grief. And we survived in the first couple of years. And then we began to go from survival to a little less of glazed eyes. And then we came into this space, and my husband and I grieve differently because everyone's grief is different. And we can be in the same house and sit with just pure wonderment of, my gosh, who was he? What are we going to do? And then we came up with a question of exactly that. So what are we going to do? It sits on a board just to the left of where I work, and when I'm doing my other gigs and when I get to interact with people. So what are we going to do? And the book came 3 years after he passed, as I began to talk about some of those experiences, because I couldn't listen to music for 3 years after he had died. And we lived by music in our existence. I ran to music. I strummed to music. We lived and cleaned, and Dallin bounced and bopped to music for all of his years. And then I could not bear it. And then I could. And it was this strange place, because then experiences came back exactly with the songs of the titles that are the chapters in this book. And that's what this book became, along with the experiences in the book. And perhaps that's a part of how we came together. And yet my husband did not read this book until it was published. And I said, "You're
Mm.
everywhere in this book. Brandon is everywhere," because that's the three of us. We are three. That's how it is. And Brandon didn't read it until it was published because he's like, "I lived it. Yeah, go for it. You could, yeah, it's life." And then we continued. And now we continue with that same question of what are we going to do? For us, for other people who have come through grief, are in it, are sitting with it, are overwhelmed and washed with it, what are we going to do? And that's my current quest for people alongside and sitting still with them, because somebody did it for me. That's what it is.
Definitely. So it is. It totally is. And so now it says here you're a big speaker and presenter. Does it mean do you go now to different places and talk about this in public to try and help other people that might be going through this? Do you know of any other families that maybe had something happen with their son too or daughter that's similar, and you're trying to help educate them a little bit?
The first time I spoke about any of this was when Dallin again was in the hospital. Before that, I really sat and enjoyed life as this anonymous human on the planet who was adventurous. And then when Dallin was in the hospital, a doctor came up and asked if I would share our experience of being the parent of a child who had come to the hospital and now was surviving an illness. I said no, and then yes. And that was my first experience speaking and teaching with others in that setting. And since then, I have been able to talk with medical personnel, doctors, nurses, many other people, and also universities and schools and a lot of people about what it feels like to come through this type of medical need and disability. Also about Dallin's assistive technology. He used many different ways to communicate, use mobility devices, and what was coming next for him. He used that every day of his life for 20 years, and what a great space for him to tell us, to become the advocate so that we knew what he needed and how to do it. It's also how we can find this resilience that he taught for every one of us, right alongside the ridiculous, gnarly, you gotta be kidding me. Why is there one more shoe dropping on us? And by the way, it comes with a boulder that will splat you flat. That's what I have also chosen to do all along these ways. And it feels like more than 30 years and also just a blip of time. Also that.
Definitely. And is there is there a website that if anybody wants to contact you, do you have website there they can learn more about your story and Dallin's story? Because I know a lot of people, and the reason I ask is I know a lot of people sometimes they use speaking engagements like this as a healing process for themselves too. So somebody who's like yourself who's gone through this, sometimes going out there and speaking to college and universities and getting on podcastings, that it helps with your healing process too. And but I'm sure there's a lot of people, even if it's not the exact same situation that Dallin was going through, they have somebody in their life that's going through something that they just can't, they're having trouble getting through that themselves. And I think something like you coming on this podcast like this is something that's definitely going to hopefully help a lot of people out there to show that they're not alone out there. There's other people out there that are willing to to stretch out and help you out too. Is there a website or something they can come to? And what's a good way that they can actually purchase your book? Because I know when you and I talked, the first thing I did was, as we were talking in our pre-interview, I bought the book as we were talking. I said, "Oh, there, I've already bought it." So I'm looking forward to reading this myself to learn more. But how can somebody get in touch with you if they want to talk more about it, or maybe have you speak for them at their conference or something?
One of the best ways to get in touch with me is my website. That's juliapearce.net. That's Pearce. And the way to find the book is either on Amazon or it's also on my website. If you go to one of the tabs, it will be there under speaking or writing. And I love doing the speaking part. Dallin's story goes across many, many avenues. People have said that to me. Dallin's story is one, and all of our lives of why are things still difficult? And I have been trying to wait for perfection or exactness. We still can find this moment, and I still strive for it every day. But those are the ways to find me, two of the best ways. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram.
And when they go to your website, juliapearce.net, what will they find on there?
Part of what they'll find is my 3 acts. Right now, I'm in my 3rd act. I mentioned my first 2. This 3rd act of still trying to be, oh my gosh, why are we here and what am I doing? This is my 3rd act. It's also, they'll find how to get to me if you want to engage with speaking more about my writing, what else I've been writing about. And I also have a weekly blog because I just love to write about things I see in the world.
I think that's awesome. That is awesome. So before we go, I'd love to get one thing I ask my guests all the time is before we leave, to leave us with words of wisdom, some last words to the public that you would like to throw out there that might help them through anything they're going through. What are some last final words or words of wisdom that you'd like to throw out there?
One of the things that I learned in these few decades, I'm a few decades old now, is we second guess what we could have done. What if? What if I had done this? What if I had done that? It's one of the things I write about. And I now realize that if I could go back in time and think about all of those what ifs, I would have been kinder to myself. We make the decisions that we can in the space that we're in and the people who are with us at that time. And when I look back, there are things I could have done differently, but not with the information I had at the time. And I would have been kinder to the person then. What a great gift to be kind to ourselves in the space that we are. That's what I would say.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on today. I know it's not easy to come on and talk about this type of stuff. I very much appreciate how humble, I'm very humbled and how very appreciative you are to be vulnerable and come and talk about this. I know it's still not easy. It's still fairly fresh. And to anybody out there, make sure you go on to Amazon, whether it's the US one or the Canadian one. You can go on, you can buy this book. The name of the book again, The Boy Who Became More Than We Could Imagine. Definitely go check it out and purchase your copy. And for anybody else out there, make sure you share this episode with anybody else, whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're listening to this on our Spotify or on our audio version. Make sure you subscribe and share this with family and friends so they can come and listen on to Julia's amazing story today. And again, I'd like to thank you, Julia, for being here. And to everybody else out there, make sure you stop by again and check us out. Remember, if they ask, say the Butler did it.